Well, hello everyone. Welcome this afternoon. This is going to be a great panel, and you know what's so interesting is that I was working with a client about 18 months ago, and they were asking what are some of the big issues that are going to come out of COVID. And so we talked about things like outdoorization of sports, accessibility to sports, the rise of women's sports and how important that was. And down the list was sustainability. And this was a client in Asia, one of the larger organizations. They're doing some really unique work. But sustainability was down the list. Fast forward a year, and they say the number one thing everyone is asking us is about sustainability. What are your ESG policies? What are your purpose policies? So when we were thinking about panels for Sports Matters, we thought we got to talk about this. And luckily today, we have some very great panelists who are joining us. I'm joined by Erica Kerner. She is the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at SailGP, and she actually lives here in Singapore. So there's lots of, welcome Erica, great to have you here. And we also have Sven Schaefer, who's the Group Head of Brand Activation, Sponsorship, and Events for UBS, and he's based out of Zurich. So we're going to get a really good perspective of all the different things that are happening in ESG and purpose. And so we'll dive right in. So first question to Erica. So Erica, how do ESG and purpose drive your strategic decision-making with everything that you do at SailGP?
Well, I think most of you probably heard my boss talk earlier this morning, and the ocean is our racetrack. So sustainability and purpose has been embedded in the core of our DNA since the beginning. And we actually, I think, use it to motivate almost every decision that we have, whether it's how we travel our boats around the world. You've listened to some Formula One this morning, and we have a very different strategy. We actually work with our partner Kuehne + Nagel, and we ship everything by ocean freight because of our carbon footprint. So
and that affects your scheduling too, I imagine. So there's a lot of thinking around that, and that's a big decision because potentially you could be doing more events or what have you. So
exactly.
Really tied to purpose. Interesting.
So I'm sure we'll talk a lot about the specifics. Sure. I won't go into it now, but I mean, I would say we like to think of, we want to be the most sustainable sports league in the world. We think we already are. We are climate positive, which is we say a step above carbon neutral, because in our events we take more greenhouse gases out of the environment than we put in.
Okay. Could you take us through some of the key pillars and what you're doing in those initiatives as well?
Sure. Under our purpose agenda, we have kind of three pillars. One pillar is about sustainability and impact, and we are the first league that actually has two podiums at the end of our sport. One for the sport and one for the earth. So we have what we call the Impact League. And at every stop, our teams compete against each other in 10 categories, from water consumption, energy consumption, waste disposal, diet, as well as using their voice, which is my area. How do they use their social media, their channels, their fans to spread their impact stories and stories about the earth? So at the end of the season, there's a winning trophy for the Impact League, and New Zealand was the winner of that one last year, and $100,000 went to their impact partner, which was about the ocean. So that's one pillar. The other pillar we have is about gender equity, and our sport is very male dominated, but yet as a sport, it's one sport that could be completely gender neutral. There's no reason why we can't have an all-female boat at one time, or a woman skipper. So we have the Women's Pathway, which is about bringing diversity, starting first with females, but eventually other diversity as well, onto the boats. And we just celebrated 2 days ago the 1-year anniversary of having a woman on every single boat in every single competition. So that's exciting. And then the last pillar is Inspire, which is about getting more kids and, again, more people into the sport of sailing and foiling. And so when we're here in Singapore in January, we'll have hopefully about 1,000 kids who can go through a training program with us and really learn about the sport, but also the environment.
Excellent. No, and it clearly drives everything that they do, and you'll see it in all the coverage. And if you haven't seen SailGP, I encourage you to watch it. It's great. It's super fun and awesome action, which is also key. Okay, Sven, you are across a lot of different verticals. So in terms of, you've got everything from New Arena, which we'll talk about. You sponsor F1 with Mercedes. You've got contemporary arts events. You've got the ever-famous Art Basel, all these different things. So again, how does ESG and purpose impact and influence your strategic decision-making? And can you give us some examples of how that's rolled out?
I mean, first of all, we launched our purpose last year, reimagining the power of investing, connecting people for a better world. I mean, once you talk about a purpose, I mean, there's no room for compromises. So we had to really look how we can transform our portfolio. So basically, two things we did. One is a so-called purpose framework, which allows us to analyze the properties against the purpose. Is anything in conflict, or where do we have gaps to kind of shift the needle in terms of activation in this direction? The other thing we did is we developed a sustainability playbook, which is basically a toolbox which allows us to kind of align our activation against ESG. And you know, the UBS Arena was the first property where already in the negotiation, ESG was part of the discussion and was across, you know, the E, the S, and the G. You know, for example, you know, once you put your name on a building, there's also much more responsibility with it. So, you know, 1/3 of the staff for the arena is being sourced locally in Elmont, where the arena is being built. You know, we have a partnership with 43 Oak, which is an organization which is looking after and supporting kids from underserved communities getting into hockey. You know, hockey in the US is a very white and male-dominated sport. So 43 Oak is trying to address that and is supporting that. But also on the sustainability side, you know, already funds in the you know, fee is kind of allocated against ESG. For the other projects and properties, you know, the sustainability playbook helps us now to implement it consistently across the different properties.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, you were talking about the arena itself, and you know, I know that one of the goals was to be, I think, carbon neutral by 2024. You'll be the first one on the East Coast, something like that, because there's a couple on the West Coast that were built. And I mean, this arena, if you haven't seen it, it's amazing what they've done. I think the other part to it is, I remember reading a little bit, it's things like they have metrics around power and energy. They have metrics around food waste. They have metrics around, you know, how are people getting there? And so it's I mean, quite extensive. And so one of the things I wanted to, if you could elaborate a little bit more, is you have that whole metrics that you set up. What were some of the key things that you had as part of the key metrics that you were looking at as a framework against events and activities?
I mean, in general, it's carbon neutral, net zero, or
okay,
you know, SailGP at some point being positive. I think that was one of the key metrics. But as you said, I think food waste was one important part, and the local community is kind of benefiting from that. So I think what we really try to build is an ecosystem and have really clear, defined KPIs against these. As I said, with the other properties, we, you know, every time now we're building these in, you know, we have clear net zero goals with all our properties now by now.
Yeah. Just one thing to add to that. So same, we work on metrics that are evaluated by third parties. And, you know, you would think that the things that were the number one villains, if you would be like the helicopter and things like that. It's not. The biggest challenge we have, and I think you'll have with the stadium as well, is fan travel. Mm-hmm. And there's so many things, we've brought all of our numbers down, but fan travel is the biggest one I think that we all will have to attack in the future.
Mm-hmm. So really, and you see a lot of this around the metrics are important, and I think the third-party reporting, because there are, of course, with something like this, there's a lot of people saying, oh, we're actually doing this, when actually maybe not, and so there's audits and things of that nature. I know, Erica, you also came out recently with a very interesting report. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, it actually comes out tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
So we have our first purpose report, annual report, and I don't think we're the first in sport to do it, but it is our first, and I think it's about 250 pages long, which I apologize to everyone. But there was just so much to talk about that there was nothing we could cut out in the first year. So we're very excited about that and look for it tomorrow.
Okay, great. Sven, a question back to you in terms of sponsors approaching you. So you have, obviously, you have many great properties, and others would love to be affiliated with UBS. So how are they approaching you, and do you think that there's enough awareness of kind of the issues that you're looking at and just sensitivity around sponsors and what they're doing? Has that picked up in the sponsorship world?
Certainly, yes. I mean, I don't think I get any proposal which doesn't have now a chapter on ESG. I think really now is to look at who is really serious about it, is leading the way, like SailGP is doing. So for us, we basically built almost like a briefing template because there are all these shiny presentations, but I think really the key for us is, are we aligned as corporations on these aspects? And as you said, I think it is easy on the E side of ESG to have these KPIs in place. I think sometimes we struggle still with the S, but that's something we're working on as well. For us, it's really how are the partners responding back to it. And what also changes for us is we just don't want to be just associated with it. We want to have an active role. As a company, we help in corporations to transform into net zero. We are, one of the leaders in sustainable investing. So, I think there's a lot of things we can bring to the table as well. And I think it has to be a partnership and, being aligned in terms of the goals you're trying to reach.
Yeah, the alignment, absolutely key always with anything in sponsorship for sure, and making sure that it's deeper and there's ways to activate. And so then, Erica, from an activation perspective, that's probably a key part of what you do because you're there to help amplify the messages of your partnerships and things like that. And what are you finding that's resonating most and best in terms of working with your partners?
Well, it's funny, as Sven was talking about the proposals that are coming in, having the ESG section, we won't even entertain a potential going into a brand unless that brand is also dedicated to purpose. So there have been some very, very lucrative deals with energy or oil and gas or companies that you might think we would want as a startup, but yet we won't talk to them unless they share our purpose journey. We're not perfect, but we're on a journey, and so our purpose team wants to make sure that those partners are also on that same journey.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. And I think, again, it just ties into really, again, certainly in this area, I think it's authenticity is critical. And this is not something that you take it lightly. It's got to be done super authentically. There's no question.
Yeah, because with social media, what it is today, if you're not authentic and you don't walk the walk, you're going to get called out. So you have to, because everybody is now the social watchdog.
That's a good way to put it, social watchdog. Okay, in terms of, one of the questions I've had, Sven, are you seeing different reactions to what you're doing amongst different generations of your clients? So you've got quite a broad range of clients, and Raja, are you seeing different things resonate, or is it something that everyone is identifying and saying, yes, these are, these ESG and purpose matters across all?
In general, I would say it matters across all, but I think there's an emphasis under the younger generation where it's just expected. It's a given. It's by default. I think, let's say, the older generations appreciate it and obviously resonate very well to it. But I do believe that with the younger generation, it's just expected these days.
Okay, and then Erica, in terms of your messaging, you obviously would segment to your different audiences. Take us through some of what you're doing there, if you could.
Well, it's complex with different audiences and different regions and different places around the world. But what we do is every one of our teams has a purpose partner. So in Australia, for example, they work with Parlay for the Ocean. And every event they race for, they do purpose projects on behalf of that NGO in every location that we race. So as a league, we're doing a lot, but we're making sure that we're doing it locally at the country level through the country teams. And I think that's one of the differences that we have with other sports leagues and really makes it real in the community. So again, every city that we race in, we do purpose projects, but our teams are doing projects are all year long.
Do you find any region seems to be more aware of this than others, or is it universal?
I think it's really universal because,
great.
again, I think I said this at the beginning, the ocean is our racetrack. So a lot of our NGOs are ocean-based, not all of them, but some of them. And sailors see the change in the ocean more than anyone. You know, Pete and Blair, who are the America's Cup winners and Olympic champions, who are the skippers or co-CEOs of our New Zealand team, they said that they did a around the world circumnavigation because they had been told by all these sailors about all the incredible sea life that you see and fish and mammals and whales, and it's amazing, you have to do it. And they did it, and they saw almost nothing.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why they've committed, and they started an NGO called One World Ocean. And so I think because it's so much a part of our sport, it is a part of our DNA.
Well, that's great. Okay, well, one of the things we do always strive at all that matters, and especially as sports matters. Any final takeaways that can help anyone who's looking to develop these programs? Any key things that you've taken? Let's start with Sven. You've got that great roadmap that you talked about. Any tips for everyone here?
I think, first of all, you should really take a step back, because I think naturally you tend to, especially when you analyze an existing portfolio, trying to kind of reverse engineer it. But I think taking a step back and really take the time to develop these frameworks or playbooks or whatever it is, and really be serious about it, because, you know, as Erica said, you have to walk the talk. And if you're not, especially as a purpose-driven organization, you will be called out for it. So really take the time to do these analysis and then find the right partners for it. Because, you know, I think you have to be serious about it. You know, I think for us, one of the discussions were the last 1.5 years as well with Formula One. Now you finally see that the sport also is going in that direction, which allows us now to stay in the sport and work with our partner. And once again, having picked a partner who is leading the way, right? They announced just a few weeks ago that they bought bioaviation fuel for all their travel, which is a very costly thing these days. But that is a sign that we are with the right partner who is really disrupting the space and is trying to lead the way there. And I think that's really, you know, in a nutshell, take the time to do this analysis, clearly define what are your KPIs, and then transform the portfolio in that direction.
As you can see as well, Sven is very passionate about it, which is great, and I think that's a key part to these initiatives. And Erica, any final thoughts and guidelines for everyone here?
I mean, I think for us, and the reason I'm up here speaking, is that we see our mission also as inspiring other sports leagues and entities to take this journey as well. You know, if we can get an impact league in all sports, that would be amazing. So I think for us, I would say the best piece of advice is make sure that you have buy-in from the top, because, you know, I hope most of you saw Russell speak earlier. He's bought in from the very heart. Larry Ellison is bought in from the very heart, and that makes our job much easier. If you don't have that top-level buy-in, I think it's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Very well said, both. It's excellent. And certainly, Erica, you've got such a broad range of experience with global organizations. This must be super exciting and unique to pull together all the different elements. Okay, well, everyone, to wrap things up, a key thing, I think, is here in Asia, this is going to become an even larger part of all elements of the sports industry. And so it's been excellent having both of you on the panel today, and thank you for your insights. Super inspiring, and some great roadmaps and guidelines for the future to build this more out in Asia. Thanks. Thank you, guys.
Loron.